Hi, I'm Steve Adubato at the Tisch WNET studio. It's my pleasure to introduce a fellow Rutgers alum who achieved real greatness. She's Becky Quick, co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box and also of the nationally syndicated show On the Money, seen Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Squawk Box, seen every day from 6 to 9.
You're right. Thank you, Steve. It's great to see you.
Great to see you. By the way, what time do you get up for that show?
My alarm is set every morning for 3:44 because 3:45, 3:40, you know, it's all in that arena. But as somebody who gets up really early in the morning, you have a very fitted schedule. I know where I'm supposed to be every minute of the morning.
Yeah, describe Squawk Box for folks who do not know it.
It's a financial show, and we're there covering the news that's happening in the morning, but we're trying to do more than just report the news. We're trying to analyze things that are coming out, and sometimes we take a little bit of a fun look at life, but we're really there covering the markets, covering money, covering what's happening on Wall Street and in Washington, and just trying to get people set up for what to expect that day with the markets and beyond.
Becky, you and I have talked about Rutgers before. We have a connection through our friends at Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. And, you know, I remember last time I saw you were, you know, thinking about the Rutgers piece of this, and it's become a very different institution, the Big Ten piece. But I was interested about this. When you were graduating from Rutgers, is this what you envisioned for yourself?
No. I know you went through Eagleton, right?
Yes, the Eagleton Institute of Politics.
Eagleton Institute.
I had a very different thing in mind for myself.
Me too.
This wasn't it.
This wasn't, and not for me either. And I was really interested in politics. I graduated a poli-sci major, and I had worked in Washington.
By the way, Eagleton Eagleton for the folks who don't know is one of the institutes at the university. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's for real political. For lack of a better word, geeks.
For really smart people.
Right.
I'm joking.
No, it was. I didn't get picked. I applied to Eagleton.
Oh, you
I didn't get picked.
Now all of a sudden I feel
I'm
better
jealous.
about my kid.
But I thought I'd wind up in Washington. I went and I worked there during my summers. That's where I did my internships. I thought I'd be a legislative assistant when I got out. Right. But I was the editor of the Daily Targum, and I
which is a great Rutgers paper.
It is a great paper. Yeah.
Right. But so the politics fascinated you.
Completely.
And you thought you'd be on the other side, actually engaged in the political policymaking process.
Yeah.
When does the piece come in where you say, you know what? I want to analyze this. I want to make sense of it for people.
It was never a conscious decision. It was, I had a friend who offered me a job at the Wall Street Journal as a news associate, and I thought it'd be a great thing to do that for a year. And then I'd go to Washington. But the Journal was such a fantastic place to work and such a fantastic place to grow up, and there was always a new job and a new opportunity. And I got sucked into that, and I stayed there for 8 years. And I just kind of have never really thought enough ahead to figure out what I was doing next.
Where's television come in? Because that's all print.
Right, that's all print. I was a print journalist, but the Wall Street Journal had a partnership with CNBC. And they pulled me in and started having me do more and more, and I just kind of wound up there accidentally.
But anchoring, it's interesting. When you're anchoring, you're navigating this ship, and you've got to tell everyone who your colleagues are?
Yes, Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin are my two co-anchors, and we just really have a great time. I don't necessarily think of it so much as anchoring as just being in the thick of things and knowing what's happening as it's coming up fast. We've got computers in front of us on the set.
Right.
And the show is very lightly scripted. They'll have some headlines for us to read, but a lot of what we do is unscripted, just talking about what we think about the headlines. And honestly, we don't practice it before we get on set. We don't even really talk about it in the makeup room. We just react. And when you've been with people for a while, and you get to know their personalities, and you've been following financial journalism for a while, it's just fun to see the different perspectives that each of us bring to a story.
You know, we had one of your former colleagues, Maria Bartiromo, was in the other day, who made the switch over to another network. And we were talking about the whole question of who the market is for financial news. And she got her perspective. I'm curious about yours.
I don't know what Maria said, but personally, when we're talking to people in the morning, I'm thinking about a lot of different people who are in our audience. Sometimes it's people who are working on Wall Street who are doing this for a living, but more often than not, what we're trying to do is reach out to the people at home. And often I think of my mother in my head and try to think what she would be thinking about this and making sure that we're not talking down to people, but we're explaining it in ways that the average person at home can play along. Because I really think money, if you follow the money, you follow the trail for everything. It's not just financial news. I think every story you break down can come down to a money angle in some way, shape, or form. And it gets back to what's important to people and how they can live the way they want to. So So a lot of times we're just trying to make sure that we're keeping those viewers in mind too.
Becky, how has 2008 and everything that happened in 2008 and the horrific economic implosion impacted the world?
Oh, I think it's had huge impacts that have not even played out yet, Steve. We saw what happened instantaneously, where people lost jobs, where people lost massive parts of their savings, of their 401ks, where people lost their homes. That was the immediate impact, but I think we carry so much more with it because there was a real loss of faith in institutions, whether it be the banks, whether it be Washington, whether it be people who are supposed to be the watchdogs and on the lookouts, the media. There was a big loss of faith. Yeah, people have asked us, why didn't you tell us it was coming? It was hard to know what was out there when even the people who were supposed to be in charge weren't seeing it either. So I think there's been a huge backlash and a loss of faith. And I think that is going to have long-term implications. I think about it when we talk about the millennials who are out there now, maybe starting to finally get to the point where they're going to buy a home, but a lot of them have debt that's left over from college. And a lot of them are much more conservative in terms of thinking, look, they watched several massive crashes come through. If they weren't in 2001, if they didn't get hit, they definitely did in 2008. And it makes them lose faith in the institutions like Wall Street and like the stock market. And that's really troubling. I think about what happened after the Great Depression, where people who lived through that wouldn't buy stocks ever again.
That's right.
It's really hard to get to a point where you can save enough money before you retire if you don't invest in stocks and invest in stocks where you're young. And I worry about that.
But Becky, on the other side of things, you've interviewed Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, and the folks who may have taken a hit but are doing just fine.
Yeah.
What do you take away from those interviews in terms of their worldview and how much different it is from the folks you just talked about? Is it literally like two different universes?
It depends on who you're talking to. Somebody like Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, they're spending a lot of time and a lot of money investing back. Buffett has given Gates and the Gates Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the bulk of his fortune. He's giving away 99% of his money, and most of that is going to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Excuse me, is that the exception, people who are incredibly wealthy giving that much away?
No, I find it more and more. I mean, we had Ken Langone was on our set this morning, and he is also incredibly active in
Tell folks again, Ken Langone at Home Depot.
Right, one of the founders of Home Depot.
Gives a lot away.
Yeah, a lot of money away. And I think that probably gets lost in some of this. But I'm not saying that they can walk in someone's shoes who lost everything in 2008. But I am saying that they are aware of the massive inequality that exists and are actively trying to do something about that. And I think that's pretty important, too.
I'm curious about this because in our business, we have relationships with people, and sometimes it's tough to separate those friendships and those acquaintances from what you have to do. Warren Buffett, you have a good relationship?
I do. Yeah, I would call him a friend.
You'd call him a friend?
I would.
Have you found it tough sometimes to ask the really tough questions of Warren Buffett because of that relationship?
No, I actually find it easier to ask tough questions of him because he knows it's my job. And more importantly, he understands that if I don't ask the question, he doesn't look any better for it. I've asked him some pretty tough questions. Even last year, he was under fire because of the Coca-Cola decision.
That's right.
And he's the major owner. He's the majority, not the majority owner, but he's the largest shareholder in Coca-Cola.
His largest individual shareholder.
Right,
yes.
Or Berkshire Hathaway, his company is. They own about 12% of Coca-Cola shares. And he was under pressure because he abstained from voting on a very contentious shareholder vote. There was a movement afoot that was led by David Winters, another large shareholder, although his share is much smaller than Warren Buffett's, but he was pointing out that he didn't think that the pay was correct, and the way that they were paying a lot of their managers had set up some of the incentive pay.
Right.
Warren Buffett actually agreed with him, but didn't vote with him in that. And he was
challenged Buffett.
I did, yeah.
He wasn't peeved?
I was surprised. No, I think he understands that people have these questions. I'm not asking questions that other people aren't thinking. So if I have an interview with him and I don't ask him those questions, he doesn't look good and I don't look good for it.
It's interesting. There have been some political figures that I've had friendly relationships with. I've asked them really tough questions. And
but how did you feel about it?
I felt fine. They didn't. No, they didn't. Trust me.
Look,
they have different reactions than what you just described.
Some people have thinner skins.
Yeah.
And
We're not naming names, but
some people have thinner skins, and I will admit there have been some people who haven't liked questions, and I'm thinking of someone that very recently, in fact, I talked about them today.
On the air.
Yeah, who had a much thinner skin, and I won't name names either, but look, if you don't take the tough questions, you shouldn't be in the position that you're in.
And we shouldn't be sitting here to do this.
Right.
Switch gears dramatically. The Brain Injury Association, you've had a very strong, Brain Injury Alliance, you've had a very strong connection with them. Explain why and the impact.
Well, the Brain Injury Alliance of New Jersey is my pet charity, and for a couple of reasons. I'll tell you, when I was at Rutgers, when I was a student there, my younger brother, Brian, was riding his bike. He was 12 years old, and he was hit by a car. And he suffered a traumatic brain injury. So it was something that my whole family's been very involved in. Brian lives at home with my parents in southern New Jersey now. And it's an organization that does so much good, both from preventative measures, trying to work with children, with the elderly, trying to make sure that they can help prevent brain injuries, getting kids to wear bike helmets, but also helping out families who have been impacted and had their lives torn apart by a brain injury. Because a brain injury doesn't affect just one person, it affects everyone who loves you. And there are families who struggle so heartily. I mean, we were fortunate, I use this term very loosely, but we were fortunate in the position that my brother was injured just before the New Jersey Joint Underwriters Association, that plan ended.
The JUA.
The JUA was there. And as a result, Brian has all kinds of help that families who had injuries after that date, that they haven't had the same benefits. And so the Brain Injury Alliance tries to help a lot of those families and make sure that if you're in a position where you have a son who you can no longer carry up the stairs anymore to his bed because you have all the bedrooms on the second floor, maybe they can help you by installing either an elevator or a chairlift to get you up the ways.
It's a great organization.
Yeah, it is a great organization.
Last question before I let you out of here. You've interviewed all kinds of leaders in the world of business and other arenas, and you're a leader yourself. What would you say the most significant lesson you've learned about leadership has been so far?
Watching the great leaders, watching the people that I admire the most, they remind me that you should treat everyone the way you want to be treated, and you should, when in a position of power, use that power appropriately and help the people who don't have a voice.
Boy, do people forget that. Yeah. Do you mind if I plug again?
No, please do.
Yeah, Becky Quick is the co-anchor of CNBC's Squawk Box, seen every morning, Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 a.m., and also on the nationally syndicated show On the Money, 7:30 p.m. on Sundays. A Rutgers alum, one of the best we've ever had coming out of that great university. Thank you so much, Becky.
Steve, it is a pleasure to be here with you, and great to see you.
All right, you got it. Stay with us from the Tisch WNET studio here in the heart of Lincoln Center. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by PNC Bank, Bergen Community College, United Water, Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, MD Advantage Insurance Company of New Jersey, and by Fedway Associates. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.